Zubair bin Huda sighed in frustration as he ended his weekend shift on February 5, 2016. The printer in his office hadn't been working, and none of the usual solutions had worked. This was no ordinary printer. Zubair worked at Bangladesh Bank, the central bank of Bangladesh, and little did he know, someone had disabled the device. The next morning, Saturday the 6th, Zubair became suspicious. The printer still sat there, innocently blinking. He went to the IT department and restarted the printer and its network. This time, the printer began spewing out countless documents, each showing transaction records for hundreds of millions of US dollars wired from Bangladesh Bank to people he had never heard of. Someone had attempted to siphon nearly $1 billion from Bangladesh Bank's account. The Bangladesh Bank had just fallen victim to a sophisticated bank heist, but it wasn't orchestrated with guns, getaway vehicles, or face masks. And things would have turned out much worse if it weren't for some bad luck. The printouts revealed that it had all started the night before Zubair's Friday weekend shift. Just after Zubair left for the day on Thursday evening, someone had requested a total of 35 multi-million-dollar transfers from New York. Like many financial institutions, Bangladesh Bank held significant funds in an account with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. It uses this account to send or receive funds in US dollars. At the time, Bangladesh Bank had close to $1 billion in this account. And now, as Zubair read the printouts, he realized that someone had gone after the entire contents, attempting to steal a total of $951 million. An unauthorized individual had somehow accessed the bank's highly secure SWIFT credentials and were using them to fraudulently drain the account. SWIFT is a highly secure worldwide network. It gives financial institutions the confidence to send and receive money through a trusted medium. But for Bangladesh Bank, it was now a desperate race to stop those transactions and recover as much money as possible. The Bangladesh Bank staffers immediately tried to reach the Fed in New York by any means available, but by then, it was the weekend in the US. Their pleas for help never got beyond the empty desks sitting quietly in the night of New York. By the time the American staffers at the Fed returned to work after the weekend, it was far too late. They had, on the Thursday evening of the heist, sent urgent messages double-checking the authenticity of the transfers. But with a penetrated SWIFT system and printer, Zubair and Bangladesh Bank had never received their warnings. Someone had intercepted them. The Fed had authorized the transactions, and the funds had moved. Bangladesh Bank immediately traced most of the stolen money to accounts in the Philippines and reached out to the relevant authorities to halt the transactions. However, Monday the 8th of February was a Chinese New Year holiday in the Philippines. Hence, nobody answered. The money was withdrawn from these accounts long before they could be frozen, and the bank lost the trail. 12 days after Zubair stumbled upon the heist, the governor of Bangladesh's central bank urgently summoned Rakesh Asthana and his cybersecurity company, Wix, to find out what happened. They searched through the CCTV footage, but nobody had entered Zubair's 10th floor SWIFT offices. The only person to appear in the footage was a cleaner. Nothing suggested that anyone in Bangladesh Bank's headquarters had set up the SWIFT transfers. That left only one possibility. The investigators analyzed the system's binary code, recreating the events of the previous days. Much to their dismay, they discovered that a hacker had used a spear phishing attack to gain access to the bank's systems over a year ago in January 2015. After using social media to build an understanding of employees, they disguised malware in a resume and sent it in as a job application. All they needed was one Bangladesh Bank employee to open the zip file, and the hackers were in. They spent over a year cautiously maneuvering through the network, implementing subtle malware and covering their tracks, jumping unseen from device to device until, after an entire year, they finally hit their target on January 29, 2016, an authorized SWIFT computer. Once they had carefully manipulated the source code to grant them access, there was one last obstacle. The printer would print a physical record of each SWIFT transaction the bank made, so the hackers overrode the printer to hide any records of their heist until it was far too late. Rakesh and his team realized this was a well-thought-out plan. Bangladesh's weekends run from Friday to Saturday. Hackers had logged onto the Swift computer on the evening of Thursday, February 4th, after Bangladesh Bank's employees had left for the week, but still with plenty of time for the Fed to make the transfers. Zubair and his colleagues had initially dismissed the malfunctioning printer on Friday, only discovering it had been compromised on Saturday afternoon, by which point the New York Fed had closed for its weekend. Then, when Bangladesh Bank tried to retrieve their stolen money from Manila, the Philippines banks were enjoying their long weekend. Their frantic calls for help would go unanswered all over the world. By exploiting international time zones and the long weekends, hackers had given themselves a full 4 days in which they could move the money and run. Bangladesh Bank was horrified to discover just how long they had been compromised and how thoroughly they and the worldwide financial system had been outfoxed. Meanwhile, across the world, the FBI heard about the case that had targeted the New York Fed and opened their own investigation. It wasn't long before agents found similarities to the devastating late 2014 penetration of Sony Pictures, in which hackers had stolen and published private documents. In those attacks, the spear-phishing email addresses, IP addresses, and coding styles were the same ones used to target Bangladesh Bank. The FBI was increasingly confident that the North Korean government was behind the Sony hack. The hackers' ability to stay hidden within a network even after defenders thought they had purged them from their midst was unparalleled. Thus, as of late 2014, the international community began referring to this North Korean state hacker team as the Lazarus Group. If all went according to plan in February 2016, the Lazarus Group would walk away with $1 billion. Or they would have, had fate not intervened. When all was quiet in Bangladesh Bank on the evening of Thursday, February 4th at 8:36 p.m., Lazarus Group hackers activated the SWIFT system and made the 35 withdrawal requests to the Fed totaling $951 million. After a few attempts, the Fed accepted the transfer requests, and the money began to move to the hackers' designated destination. Multiple accounts at the Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation's RCBC Bank in Manila, the Philippines. The hackers had opened these accounts 9 months earlier in May 2015, depositing small sums of money and leaving them dormant, ready for this day. By sheer coincidence, they had chosen the Jupiter Street branch, and the US had earlier sanctioned a Greek shipping company with connections to Iran known as Jupiter Seaways. This meant that any large SWIFT transfers mentioning the word Jupiter were to be red flagged and reviewed. Staffers at the Fed sought reconfirmation, checking the details of one transfer after another. Masquerading as Bangladesh Bank, the hackers hurriedly approved each transfer one by one. But this took far too long. By early morning, they had only been able to confirm 5 of the 35 requested transfers. The longer the hackers sat in the system, the greater the risk that someone would start an early morning shift, interrupt their carefully laid plans, and catch them in the act. At 3:59 a.m., they decided to abort, erasing their footprints and exiting Bangladesh Bank's system before being able to authorize the remaining 30 payments. In those missed transfers, they had failed to get their hands on $850 million. It was a significant blow to their heist. Still, on the Thursday night of this fateful weekend, 5 transfers valued at $101 million slipped the net. 4 of them, totaling just over $81 million, embarked on their journey to RCBC's Jupiter Street branch in Manila, making 4 fictitious account holders instant multimillionaires. Maya Digito, the bank manager, had been paid off. She transferred the $81 million from the 4 accounts into another singular RCBC account created that very same day under the name of William Go with a forged signature. Next, they directed the $81 million to a money-changing firm, Philrem, where they converted the US dollars into local pesos and withdrew the entire amount in cash. 500 kilograms in bills alone. Here, $31 million mysteriously vanished on a private jet with a Chinese businessman. The remaining $50 million was collected by two Chinese men and their assistants before they disappeared into Manila's casinos to launder the money. The gamblers slipped into their pre-booked VIP suite and began to play baccarat from 8 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. every day like clockwork. The gamblers played through their funds by betting against each other. Over an extended period in a private room, this ensures that one member of the group always wins. So the combined holdings of the group loses very little and the house takes only a small profit. This way, they converted the money through casino chips and then cashed out, making the bills virtually untraceable. Eventually, after millions of dollars continued to flow long after the Chinese New Year holiday ended, the casino suspected foul play and raided the men's hotel rooms, seizing about $2 million in chips. But they let the men walk. At this point, tens of millions of dollars had already vanished into the shadows of Macau, covertly navigating back to the criminal masterminds. Investigators never picked up the trail again after Macau, and the tens of millions of dollars belonging to Bangladesh Bank vanished, never to be recovered. Of the $101 million stolen, the Lazarus Group wired $81 million through Manila's casinos into Macau. The remaining $20 million took a different path. The final transfer from Bangladesh Bank's Fed account went to Sri Lanka. The Lazarus Group had set up an unwitting recipient, the Shalika Foundation, a modest charity in Sri Lanka. Shalika Pereira had been struggling to get her venture up and running for some time, so when she was approached with promises of staggering funds, she eagerly agreed to cooperate. Initially promised a share of $900 million from a Japanese contact, Tadashi Sasaki, by late 2014, she ended up settling for just 30% of $20 million by January 26th. Nevertheless, she quickly set up an account to receive the funds. 10 days later, completely unbeknownst to Shalika, the Lazarus Group initiated their heist. However, a critical mistake spoiled their plan. In a single stroke of the keyboard, they misspelled Shalika Foundation as Shalika Fundation. This minor error triggered a fraud detection system, freezing the money before it could reach Shalika's account. Before the hackers could react, Bangladesh Bank's frantic employees had reached the Sri Lankan bank, and it was all over. When questioned by authorities, Shalika insisted she was set up, but her contact and all other involved parties disappeared without a trace. Soon after, Shalika Pereira herself vanished. Her whereabouts remain a mystery to this day. Most investigators believe North Korean hackers to be behind the heist and that international crime has become a lucrative way to boost its isolationist economy. Alongside the $20 million recovered from Sri Lanka, authorities did retrieve around $18 million of the money sent to Manila. Despite these small victories, Bangladesh Bank would never recover the remainder of its funds, and the Lazarus Group evaded detection with $63 million. Ultimately, the only reason the Lazarus Group's Bangladesh Bank heist wasn't the world's first billion-dollar theft came down to unfortunate coincidences and a one-letter typo. Most frighteningly of all, if the hackers had waited in Bangladesh Bank's system for one more hour, they could have authorized the queries from the Fed and approved the remaining $850 million. If the Lazarus Group had gotten away with $1 billion, it could have crippled the population of the world's 64th poorest country, where most people make less than $3,000 per year. And although the Lazarus Group stole the funds from Bangladesh Bank, the target bank was the Federal Reserve, an American institution. The Lazarus Group and North Korea don't care who gets in their way, and they have the skills to outfox and outmaneuver anyone, even targets in the United States. If only vanishing with billions were a rarity. As the OneCoin scandal and the disappearance of the crypto queen illustrate, fortunes can disappear in an instant. Trust is a risky game.